Kamala's audience squirms as she yaks about pachyderms. Our video of the day comes to us from the former VP who made her first major speech last night since Trump took office. And it was another classic ball of verbal vomit.
Kamala Harris just faced some serious criticism. The person behind it, Gutfeld. He used his late-night show to go after her, making fun of her approval ratings and responses. It was messy and dramatic, almost like a slow-motion food fight. This wasn't just a joke, it was a loud, fiery political performance. Let's take a closer look.
She is referencing a viral video of elephants. Watch.
Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago? The one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake? And as soon as they felt the earth shaking beneath their feet, they got in a circle and stood next to each other to protect the most vulnerable. Think about it. What a powerful metaphor.
Yeah. It's almost like they built a wall.
Kamala Harris gave another speech, but clear logic was missing again. It sounded more like a mix of confusing words than a real message. Just when people start getting used to her unclear way of speaking, Gutfeld jumps in with sharp sarcasm, and no patience for confusion. Honestly, it felt less like a speech and more like a comedy show, even if that wasn't the plan.
Kamala Harris has created her own scented candle. And just like her, it gets lit every night. She's a drunk.
Kamala seems to have suddenly remembered that we actually have a border. For she's announced she's going to the border. True, after 4 years of denying there's a border crisis. What's changed? Why the 180? Do you suppose it's the poll?
Let's be real. The speech was supposed to uplift, energize, and carry that presidential weight. Instead, it felt more like a masterclass in verbal acrobatics. Somewhere along the way, the audience stopped paying attention and started wondering if their connection had lagged. That's how choppy it got. Then there was Gutfeld, sitting back like he'd accidentally walked into a political spoof and figured, why not stay for the laughs? What we witnessed wasn't leadership, it was primetime fuel for late-night punchlines.
Harris will visit the southern border on Friday. She said she's looking forward to finally meeting Justin Trudeau. Speaking of Harris, at the last debate, she said she was a middle-class kid. However, it appears Harris enjoyed things most middle-class kids didn't, like living abroad, private school, with some of the wealthiest places on earth. The only thing she didn't enjoy was a nanny, unlike her husband.
Greg didn't need a script or a teleprompter, just Kamala being, well, Kamala. A steady flow of buzzwords, feel-good fluff, and vague optimism practically delivered the punchlines for him. He watched her speech like it was open mic night. Except the real joke was that the former vice president seemed to think anyone would take it seriously. This wasn't policy, it was parody. Plain and unfiltered.
Mentioned Trump is the wall candidate, not Cackle's McKnee pads. Stern got even more pathetic, wondering how she doesn't nap.
When you said you don't nap, I get it, because like what you've taken on is extraordinarily difficult. And I mean, do you feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you. I want it to go well for the country.
Hold on. I need a minute. All right, we're back.
This wasn't commentary, it was a surgical strike with a chainsaw. Gutfeld didn't analyze Kamala's speech, he shredded it. Every awkward pause became set-up material, every cliché a gift-wrapped punchline. It was less political critique, more stand-up set, and Kamala unintentionally wrote the jokes for him. Her pauses felt like halftime shows, her metaphors like rejected office poster quotes, and her delivery. Let's just say Gutfeld's expressions told the story. Eyebrow gymnastics, smirks buffering like a frozen phone screen. At times, he didn't look like a commentator, he looked like a man trapped in a TED Talk scripted by a fortune cookie assembly line, wondering if he left the stove on. But it wasn't just the words, it was the confidence behind them. That's what tipped it into comedy gold. She spoke about equity like she skimmed it off a tea bag, then pivoted to America's future like she was pitching desktop wallpaper slogans. Gutfeld, unfazed, leaned in with the energy of a man who's endured for hours of feel-good nothingness and lived just to roast it.
Maybe they can circle around your husband, Doug, to protect vulnerable nannies. But Kamala brought that long-winded story in for a landing with this poignant lesson.
Because we know those who try to incite fear are most effective when they divide and conquer, when they separate the herd, when they try to make everyone think they are alone. But in the face of crisis, the lesson is don't scatter.
So powerful. But wouldn't it be more powerful with bongos?
Because we know those who try to incite fear are most effective.
While the media praised Kamala's speech as inspiring, Greg didn't seem impressed at all. He stood in the middle of the stage, smirking like he was watching a funny outtake from a TV show. Especially whenever Kamala used another dramatic metaphor about bridges, dreams, or the future, which sounded more like a dance routine than a real plan. Gutfeld reacted like someone listening to a GPS that suddenly started reading poetry. You could almost see him thinking, did she really just say that out loud? In public? Then he went all in. Gutfeld didn't just roll his eyes, he made fun of every cheerful phrase she used. While Kamala threw out feel-good quotes like, party confetti, Greg came in with common sense and sharp jokes. This wasn't just criticism, it was smart, sarcastic roasting. Kamala used catchy slogans. Greg responded with wit, reason, and heavy sarcasm. The audience didn't know whether to laugh, cringe, or look up what she even meant. Meanwhile, Greg kept pointing out the serious stuff, cutting through the fluff like he was running a fundraiser for lost brain cells. This wasn't just politics, it was comedy with a message, and Kamala was the warm-up act.
It's hard to kind of figure out what she's saying. Why doesn't anybody ever ask a follow-up question? Like, what do you mean?
Well, that should have happened in the debate.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, doesn't do interviews. You would not see her come onto the show. I can tell you right now.
We ask her now. Come on this show, Kamala. We'll have a box of wine.
She doesn't like. She doesn't like.
But it wasn't just the speech. That would have been too easy. Gutfeld went deeper. He broke down Kamala Harris's whole public image, like opening a fancy gift box only to find socks and unclear promises inside. Her laugh, her head tilt, the way she waves her hands like she's shaping invisible ideas. He made fun of it all. One of his best lines was saying her speeches feel like loud mime performances, full of awkward laughs. It wasn't mean, it was smart and sharp. Like a top chef roasting someone with style and precision. Here's the thing, you don't have to dislike Kamala Harris to admit that sometimes. When she talks, it feels like your brain freezes. For a second, there's a pause, a weird moment, and then suddenly you're trying to figure out what just happened. Gutfeld simply points that out and says, yep, you saw that too. What makes it even funnier is how calm he stays. He doesn't yell, he just cuts through the confusion like a comedian in a room full of people trying too hard to sound deep. He doesn't just mention the awkward moments, he builds his whole routine around them. You can almost imagine the teleprompter struggling as Kamala tries to turn vague ideas into something real.
First, I want to point out something Jessica said, that Trump began as a millionaire and now he's a billionaire. I think that makes him an expert in this. I would rather listen to somebody who began as a millionaire and is now a billionaire than somebody who doesn't have a damn clue about economics. I've never heard a candidate today more unsure of themselves on a topic than Kamala Harris. I think she's been burdened by the weight of expectations put on her by the media. I've never seen a better campaign ad for Trump. She's campaigning better for Trump than Trump.
He mixed in her awkward facial expressions, confusing metaphors, and strange bursts of energy like he was trying to solve a messy puzzle. It wasn't funny because it was mean, it was funny because it was true. Every moment felt familiar to anyone who's ever watched her speak and wondered, did I miss something? Or was there just nothing there? Gutfeld turned that confusion into comedy, a kind of group therapy for a country stuck buffering. And he wasn't the only one who felt that way. Millions watched, not to learn, not for a real debate, but to see someone finally say what they were all thinking, that Kamala Harris gives speeches like she's trying to put together IKEA furniture without the instructions. And Greg, he's the guy holding the tiny Allen key, calmly saying, "Yeah, you definitely missed a step." The best part, he wasn't angry or mean, it was smart, funny commentary, dressed up as political talk. Like if George Carlin put on a suit and watched hours of and Kamala, bless her, handed over all the material. Like a contestant on Whose Line Is It Anyway? Executive Edition. But Gutfeld didn't stop with just surface-level jokes. He went deep. He studied her pauses like a movie critic, reviewing a silent film. He noticed those little moments when her eyes seemed to be silently hoping the next sentence would actually make sense.
Go back to you, Vice President Harris. You flip-flopped on a lot of issues. How can voters be sure you won't keep doing that if you're elected?
Look, again, I come from a middle-class family, right? My values have never changed on that, right? I've talked about my grass being green for quite some time now. All right, and as a former, prosecutor and former state attorney general and, Willie Brown's ex, shout out to my brothers and sisters, right?
He focused on the awkwardness in the room. People tilting their heads, giving tight smiles, and checking their phones like they were hoping for a fire drill to save them. It was hard to miss. Then he looked at her Twitter feed, full of clunky grammar and vague, feel-good quotes. One tweet sounded like it was written by a chatbot trained only on fridge magnets and Pinterest slogans. Gutfeld read it out loud like a bedtime story for adults who are tired of politics. Somewhere, a PR intern probably shed a tear. But what really made it stand out? Gutfeld didn't just make fun of Kamala, he put it all in perspective. He showed a bigger problem. An administration so desperate for excitement, they handed the microphone to someone who makes public speaking feel dangerous. His sarcasm didn't come from anger, it came from real confusion. The kind of confusion you feel when someone says, "The moon is justice," and actually believes it. He didn't shout, he didn't rant. He just looked into the camera, blinked slowly, and let the strange moments speak for themselves. Somehow, that was more powerful than any joke. But of course, this is modern America. Not everyone found it funny. Critics quickly accused Gutfeld of mocking public service. As if Kamala hadn't already done that herself by explaining democracy like it was astrology during hot yoga.
No, but what about Kamala? Well, just like the corpse, it's now okay to talk about how terrible the clown was too. Because before it would have been career suicide to spill the beans and commit an act of actual journalism. Ripping on Kamala now is about as risky as wearing leather chaps to a pride parade. Right, Dr. Drew?
Meanwhile, the rest of us were just glad someone finally said it. That listening to Kamala is like watching a TED Talk that accidentally stumbled into a poetry slam. Her speeches don't sound like clear leadership. They feel more like improv, with cue cards. And Gutfeld, he turned that awkward energy into comedy gold. He took the shared confusion and turned it into a well-timed roast, a highlight reel of head-scratching moments, all delivered with a smirk. The truth is, Kamala isn't hard to parody because she's a politician. She's hard to parody because she already sounds like one. And Greg Gutfeld, he just grabbed a megaphone and said what most people were too polite to admit, that sometimes, her speeches feel like someone trying to juggle ideas in a wind tunnel, while blindfolded. He didn't act like it was deep or meaningful. He called it what it was, a performance trying to look like policy. He cut through the polished delivery and showed the awkward show underneath, where style tries and fails to cover for lack of substance. And he did it with the confidence of someone who still thinks jokes should make sense, even when politicians don't. Then came the highlight reel, the fake French accent, the confusing definitions, the laugh that sounds like a wind-up doll. On the edge, Gutfeld didn't need to exaggerate anything. Reality did all the work. All he had to do was shine a light on it.
I think it's very important, as you have heard from so many incredible leaders, for us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present, and to be able to contextualize it, to understand where we exist in the history and in the moment as it relates not only to the past but the future.
You know, that's some bad weed. Generally, when people get high, they actually have some interesting thoughts. Not her.
That's what made it so good. Gutfeld wasn't making up jokes. He was collecting them, like a guy walking through a field of political bloopers. picking up quotes and turning them into sharp sarcasm. Every odd thing Kamala said over the past year became part of a bigger picture, a collage of wait, what just happened? And the final result? A comedy special called How Did We Get Here? Even his ending was spot on. No big speech, no yelling. Just a shrug, a raised eyebrow, and the quiet feeling that we'd all just witnessed something. Both strange and unforgettable, like seeing political Bigfoot, only Bigfoot might speak more clearly by the end. It didn't feel like an attack. It felt like a support group for everyone who's ever listened to Kamala and thought, did I just zone out, or was that nonsense? Gutfeld took that shared feeling, gave it shape, and roasted it, marshmallows and all. And here's the twist. It wasn't driven by hate. Sure, he was sarcastic but not mean. Because to be cruel, you need to be angry. And Gutfeld isn't angry at Kamala, he's just honestly confused by her. That's the magic, not rage. Not pointless mockery, just one guy trying to make sense of the chaos and letting us laugh along the way.
So paranoid about her public behavior, they held a fake party ahead of a DC dinner in 2022. Her aides even considered serving wine so she could practice with a glass or two, but decided not to. Good call. The only time Kamala stops after 2 glasses is when she switches to chugging Listerine.
Gutfeld is like a guy who walked into a fancy restaurant and got served a bowl of air. Now he's just trying to write the Yelp review without sounding crazy. So where does that leave us? Kamala's still tossing out metaphors like a tipsy magician at a kid's party, and Gutfeld is on the sidelines, popcorn in hand, reminding everyone that wearing a pantsuit doesn't automatically mean you're making sense. He didn't just roast Kamala Harris, he turned her own words into a full comedy routine, like a symphony of satire. And as long as she keeps handing him the notes, Gutfeld will keep playing the tune, smirking, reacting, and turning confusion into comedy gold. Because, if there's anything funnier than Kamala's speeches, it's watching Greg Gutfeld get through them with his sanity intact and his sarcasm fully charged. And let's be honest, someone has to.